Hello Biblionauts, I am Grix and many other things, more than you can tell, and today we have a quite exciting topic. Let's talk about death. This is the Memento Mori tag. I was tagged by Steve Donaghy, who seems to have an interest in my death. But the tag was created by David, a polyglot reading. I might be looking down every now and then because I wrote down the questions and some notes to remember all the answers. But yeah, this is a tag mainly about death, which I'm sure many of you, more readers do, think a lot about death. So this shouldn't come as a surprise. This tag was bound to happen, and I'm glad it happened today, because just today I feel like making a video. I actually haven't been making many videos. Most of the videos that you've seen have been pre-recorded, because Tolstoy and Hegel have been making me fall out of love with not reading but saying what I read. It's a weird combination, reading War and Peace and the Phenomenology of the Spirit at the same time. One in terms of its length and the other one in terms of its density. But I'll keep on going, and yeah, that's as far as my reading life goes. That's all I'm gonna say. Let's get on with the tag. Yeah, so the first question is, how many books do you think you will be able to read before you die, considering your age and statistical life expectancy? Okay, so Steve said on his video that he thinks that I think that I'm never gonna die. That couldn't be further from the truth. Actually, I have a degree on learning how to die, or thinking about death at least. But I always thought I'm gonna die very young, right? Like, I always thought it's gonna be unexpected and it's gonna be very young. And I always said, if that doesn't happen, then I'm gonna die like really late. So it's either 4 books that I have left, or if we look at life expectancy, and I mean, life expectancy really changes from country to country. It's not so much about where are you coming from, but where do you live. If I were to stay in this country, I don't think I'd live for long. There's very few things here that encourage longevity in terms of the lifestyle. And in this country, I mean the UK. But I'm from Spain. It's a different country, and I'm probably never gonna live for long in either of those 2 countries. I've never lived for longer since I emancipated from my financial dependence from my progenitors. I have never lived in any country for longer than what I've been in this one, which is I've been 3 years in this one. Before that, I had never been for 6 months anywhere. So it's more unpredictable, right? As I said, it is predictable that due to the activities that I like to do, I will die a horrible death very soon. But if that doesn't happen, and therefore I have not only 4 books left, then I'll live to 100. And if I live to 100, again, the way I live my life is not... You cannot really predict linearly how many books I'm gonna read. This year, I haven't counted them. I don't have a Goodreads or anything like that. But I read somewhere around 70 books. The year before, I read 157 or 50 something books. That's a big difference. And my lifestyle hasn't even changed. I haven't even traveled somewhere else or anything like that. In the sense of, I mean, I've traveled, you've seen me in the desert and in the mountains and everything, but what I mean is that I haven't changed my basement. I am still at uni, a few months to finish. So even with that sort of stability, my reading has divided by 3 in 1 year. So I'm gonna say that probably on average, for the next 14 years, I will be reading 100 books a year, on average. Probably it's gonna be an increasing kind of thing. Then I'll probably spend 10 years not reading any books. And then the remaining 50 years, because I'm 26, the remaining 50 years I'll read, why not, 500 books a year. Because if Steve can read 1,000 books a year and not doing anything else, then I can read 500 and have a very rich social life. So why not? Yeah, so that leaves me with 26,400 books that I will read before I die. I'd sign up for that. I have a feeling that probably what will be keeping me away from reading the most, which even now is the case, is writing. Writing never takes effort for me, but I put a lot of effort into not writing for a long time, for my own philosophical reasons and convictions. But at the moment I am writing, and I'll probably stop because I have a lot to live yet, right? I believe I lived already more than a human lifetime on average, if you compare it to the average human lifetime, but not so much that I'm satisfied. So I still prioritize my phenomenological wanderings over reading, but that won't be the case for a long time. At some point I'll sit down and read and write and do little else, at least for longer periods of time that will get longer and longer as time goes on, as I get older. That's at least my prediction. As I said, I consider myself to be relatively unpredictable, although it's not for lack of clarity. I'm pretty straightforward. This is who I am. But yeah, that's question number one. This is gonna be long, isn't it? Question number two is, does this number affect your choice of book? No, it doesn't. It's just an speculation. I have no idea. I try to live as if I was dying, as if I was immortal, which is rare. It's a rare thing to do. But yeah, I don't know. I might live 200 years for all I know. What will happen? And also, if I was if that actually influenced what I read, I would not be reading the Phenomenology of the Spirit. I would not have read half of the books that I have read. Many books I've read. I did not enjoy reading. I think enjoyment is a little bit overrated. There's enjoyment in life, there's enjoyment in books, but there is also many other reasons to read a book. And all of them, the only option other than enjoyment is not acquiring information. There's many other things, many other reasons why you would want to read a book. I read books because I choose to read them, regardless of when I'm gonna die. So, question number three. What will happen to your book collection once you have passed away? Okay. I have no idea. I have somewhere between 500 and 1,000 books. I don't care. Maybe if I were closer to the date in a more visible sense, I'd make arrangements. But I don't have many friends, many people I consider friends, but I have enough. I know, like, face-to-face, in-person people who has been on my house. I know approximately 5 or 10 people that I know and I love, and that would not only want to read some of my books, but would kill to read to have my collection. I share my reading interests with all my friends, at least largely, and many of them, if they don't share the same interest, they are very curious. So if I die, they probably won't go. So I guess, like, whenever I die, people will just take my books. I'll just, like, I don't know, I don't care, like, I'm dead. So the next question will be, is there a book that helps you cope with the disturbing fact of a limited lifespan? David at Polyglot Reading, of course I will link his video and also Steve's video in the description, recommended Posthumous Memories by Bryce Cubas, who's been on my radar for a long time. I'm very sure it's a good book because I held it on a second-hand bookstore. It was in Portuguese. At that time, my Portuguese was not great, but enough to understand the book, and it looked like a cool book. It looked like a book that's recommendable. However, yeah, I mean, like, there is no book that helps me cope with death. There is life that helps me cope with death. Living helps me cope with death. And I would also say that if there is anything I need to cope with, is to live a not wasted life rather than the fact that I'm gonna die. I think it's refreshing to know that I'm gonna die eventually, because at some point this is gonna become repetitive. I'm very creative and very curious, and I change my way of living. in every single sense and in every way, periodically. At some point, I'll run out of ideas. None of us is good enough to be eternal. Maybe I'd like to live for long enough that I get to do all that I might be potential realize its full potentiality, to quote Heidegger, although that goes way back. But yeah, I don't have a book to cope. I don't need to cope. I am not disturbed by the fact that I'm gonna die. I think nature is not a state. It's not a goal. It's a generative process, a regenerative process. Death forms part of life, and you need to die in order to leave space for new life. And it would be very selfish and ill-minded to want to. Of course, we want to stay for as long as we can, but no longer than we can, no longer than we are meant to. I think we all should die eventually. I think it shouldn't be seen as much of a it's a tragedy when you don't get to do everything you wanted to do, but do something about that. That's all I'm gonna say. Yeah. Okay, that's part number one. Now, do you have a specific non-fiction book on the topic of death that you'd like to recommend? Well, I mean, I have many movies. I'll probably make a top, since somehow BookTube is almost becoming FilmTube. I've seen so many videos about tops of movies, and I know a lot more about movies than I do about books. So I'll probably make a video about, like, you know, top 10 books or top 10 movies about dying. In terms of books, as when I said I have a degree in dying, I meant that I am a philosophy student, and philosophy is largely related with the topic of death. It's one of the main concerns of philosophical thought. And in that, along those lines, I would recommend Being and Dying by Heidegger, which was the first book that made me think profoundly about death, also in a very key moment. Maybe a book that is not specifically about death, but somehow death is sort of like looming on the background. It's The Myth of Sisyphus by Albert Camus, which was the first book I encountered that made me think about the topic, like, properly. I got this book as well in Cambridge, A Social History of Dying. I haven't read it yet, but I mean, it looks pretty good. So if anyone is interested and wants to look it up, I cannot recommend it yet, but I'm pretty good at picking good books with zero knowledge about them. So yeah, I guess that. And also, going back to the previous question, I'd say that writing does help to cope. Writing is pretty much I often say that writing is a posthumous activity, or that at least that's one of the ways of seeing it. I don't think that you should be writing in order to expand your life beyond the limits of your biological existence, like Heidegger seems to want. But I do think that writing in a much more literal sense is getting yourself acquainted with the fact that you're gonna die, because the moment you sit down to write, you're sort of like retrospectively imagine a moment in which you will not be there and someone will be reading it. And also, it's a form of reflection that eventually is going to lead you to think about one of the most important topics to think about, or not so important, but definitely ever present in any life, which is death. Especially for us, as Steve says, we are temporal beings, and even inevitably, as we prepare and think of the future, we see the end of our own personal history. We can see our own horizon, and of course we start making plans for it and thinking about it, and the best way to think about anything is writing, in my opinion. So yeah, that's as far as recommendations go. Now, humor can be helpful to confront death. Do you have a favorite witty quote on this topic? I have a poem from one of my favorite poems of all time, actually, which I've already read in this channel, but I reread it. But I also have a few recommendations in terms of stand-up comedy. I love stand-up comedy. I think people who doesn't like stand-up comedy hasn't simply found the right kind. And I'm gonna recommend a couple. Well, I recommend, first of all, the first two, you have to indulge in their apology of drug addiction. But if you are able to see beyond that, I find them not only incredibly funny, but in many ways very lucid. One is Doge Stanhope, and I would recommend his stand-up Beard Hall Pushed. Pushed, P-U-S-T-C-H. Bill Hicks. From Bill Hicks, if you just wanted a quote, I would take the Just a Ride. I watched the whole stand-up, but if you just were looking for the quote, look for the 2-minute clip video of him saying life is just a ride, which is a very, that's it, the life is just a ride. And then I recommend also the, rather than a stand-up from Louis C.K., I recommend his series, his one-season TV show. He made it and he got completely broke, bankrupt for doing this, but it was very good. It's Horace and Pete. And not only does it talk a lot about death, but also mental health and many other topics. And I think it's very, very, very good. I highly recommend it. I think it's one of the best, it's one of my favorite TV shows. Or series. I don't know if there is a difference in the definition of those two words are synonyms. And then I recommend George Carlin and his stand-up on suicide. And that's as far as stand-ups go. Then I also I'm just gonna read you. Oh my god, I had it ready and somehow I lost it. Okay, this is one of my favorite poems. It's from Billy Collins, and it's The Art of Drowning. Here we are. I wondered how it all got started. This business of seeing your life flash through your eyes, flash before your eyes while you drown, as if panic or the act of submergence could startle time into such a compression, crashing decades in the vice of your desperate final seconds. After falling off a steamship or being swept away in a rush of flood waters, wouldn't you hope for a more leisurely review? An invisible hand turning the pages of an album of photographs, you up in a pony or blowing out the candles in an iconic hat? How about an animated film, a carousel of slides? Your life expressed in an essay, in one model paragraph. Wouldn't any form be better than this sudden flash? Your whole existence going off in your face, in an eyebrow, singing explosion of biography, nothing like the 3 large volumes you envisioned. Survivors would have us believe in a brilliance here, some bolt of truth forking across the water, an ultimate light before all the lights go out, drowning on you with all its megalithic tonnage. But if something goes flashing before your eyes as you go under, it will probably be a fish. A quick blur of curved silver darting away, having nothing to do with your life or your death. The tide will take you, or the lake will accept it all, as you sink toward the witty disarray of the bottom, leaving behind what you have already forgotten, the surface, now overrun with the high travel of the clouds. Billy Collins. I love this poem. What else? Where are we here? Ah, yeah, next question. Does this tag make you feel uneasy? Ah, that's the last question. Does this tag make you feel uneasy, or are you quite relaxed about this topic? Well, let's have a key. I live, as I always say, in this channel, and I'm very proud of it. That's why I keep saying it, because it is true, and I don't think it's true in almost any other case when someone else says this. I live as if I was gonna die. And I've been doing that for a long time. I've been completely independent, accountable for my own actions. And when I say independent, I mean independent in every way since I was 14. And since I was 14, first I had to secure my own financial stability and be able to travel and afford my own freedom. But as soon as I arranged that, I started to choose my own life. I've never allowed anyone else to tell me how to live, or where to go, or what to believe, or what to think, or what to do. And that amounts to an incredible amount of freedom, more than millionaires or any other people that I've ever met has. At least alive. I've met some people who's no longer alive, who was that free. But at least in a way. But yeah, the fact that I was living as if I was gonna die, meaning living every single minute of my life as my own, made me think that I was invincible. Made me think that I somehow, I had in a way escaped death, because I was prolonging it, like by making every year feel like a century. I felt like death was so far away that it would never catch me. And then I arrived in the UK after a long process of a long process that exhausted me a lot, not only bureaucratically but also in a personal sense, in a relational sense with my previous partner, on a financial sense. In many ways, I was just defeated. And then I arrived here, and the first job I got was a care home. And I don't know if you know anything to do with care homes, but I was working in agencies, so I was working in a different care home every day with different people and seeing how it goes and how people treat the elderly in this country. How care homes are horrible. Care homes are horrible places. Care homes are the third worst kind of institution or building in the history of humanity. The first one is slaughterhouses, the second one is concentration camps, and the third one is care homes. That's my opinion. Feel free to disagree, but there is, of course, a facade of humanity in the way care homes work, but most of them, especially the cheaper ones, I guess, and especially in this country because it's there's way too many old people. They work like a McDonald's. It's just like get people to do this and this and that, and it's just horrible. It's a horrible place, and it made me not be able to ignore death or escape from it or be like, oh, I had to actually work. That's one of the concessions that I have to give to this life that I chosen. Is I don't have a complete financial stability because although I'm very resourceful by traveling and doing other things, I have to eventually sometimes just sit down and eat shit for a couple of months in order to have enough money to get to the next place or realize whatever dream or project I have. And when I arrived here, the only job I would get was care homes, so I did that for a couple of months. I couldn't do it for longer than that. I just couldn't do it. It was, as I said, like I've had many jobs. I've had probably more jobs than anyone, regardless of your age. I've had more than dozens of jobs. I have more than 20 jobs. I don't know how many, but many. And that's without counting like more shorter freelancer jobs. And I never, I've had shit jobs as well. I was working when I was 14, which means I was illegal working behind a kitchen. People would try to take advantage of that. Not that I would let them, but I was in hard environments in terms of hard work. But psychologically, mentally, emotionally, there was nothing more challenging than working in that care home when I arrived in the UK. And that kind of broke me in some ways. And then I was faced with more challenges and I didn't have the strength to face them. So I fell back into bad habits, into things I used to do when I was a teenager and then I stopped doing because my life became my own. And it all spiraled down until one day when I was given the wrong kind of drug, basically. And I had a really bad trip. And believe it or not, you don't care. At the end of the day, this is my story, this is my channel, this is my life experience. I experienced my own conception of how death would be experienced. I'm not gonna go into details, but I went blind for a few hours. I had noise hallucinations. I thought I was dying. And that happened for hours and hours and hours throughout the night. And I was alone. And all of this because I was given the wrong kind of drug. I thought I was taking something I knew, and I was taking something far stronger than anything I had ever tried. So that was an experience in its own way. It completely broke me. I was broken for a few days after, and then I was okay again. And I thought, okay, now I know how that feels. Now I also know that I'm not invincible, that anyone can be broken, and I just need to digest this. And I did for a while. or I thought I did, right? And then I realized that, you know, I had sort of some sort of fear that had emerged from that. I had a strong fear towards hallucinatory, like psychedelics, to drugs, that which is not a fear that you should like should I don't think they should embrace it in fear. Of course, I'm not saying that if you are afraid of like taking heroin, you should take heroin, or if that you're afraid of jumping off a bridge, you should jump off a bridge in order to get rid of that fear. I'm not saying that, but in my case, I because of the life I live, I cannot afford having any fears. Not fears that can make me have like literally panic attacks when I see that drug or whatever. So I arranged an environment in which I was under control, and I took that drug again in order to be able to tell to myself that I was able to handle that trip, knowing what it was. Because before I didn't know what it was. That's why I was thought it was dying. And so I did, and after that I didn't. Like I actually don't take drugs, you know. Like I don't have a habit of I don't smoke. I drink alcohol once a month, but I try things, and this was one of those cases, and I just wanted to try it again so that I could not ever take that again out of my own choice, rather than fear. And so I did, and it went well, and I realized I had that power, and I felt very, very powerful in that moment, because that was my biggest fear, and I confronted it, and I continued to live as if I was dying, but no longer as with the misconception or the belief that I was immune to death, but knowing that, you know, part of living as if you were dying is also to assume that you will die. Doesn't matter how much you prolong every second by accumulating as many experiences as you can. And then I was in a hike, a very crazy hike. I was doing the Via Ferrata in Slovenia, except that we didn't have helmets or climbing gear, and we were carrying 15 kilo backpacks, me and a few friends. And apart from the fact that we were literally hanging off cliffs with no gear at all, and literally a millimeter away from a 300 meter fall, I also got bitten by a tick, and it had a very rare sickness, and no one knew what it was. I did not know that it was related to the tick either. Like for days and weeks, I was feeling worse and worse and worse. Eventually, I started bleeding, and I was taken to a hospital. And the hospital people also didn't know what to make of it. They made analysis, couldn't tell. Then I was sent to Italy, neither. Then I decided to fly to the Canary Islands, because there my Spanish healthcare system would cover my expenses on whatever check-ins they needed to do on me. And for all this time, I also thought I was dying, but this time of an actual tangible thing that, like, even doctors were wondering, like, I don't know what this is, but it seems to be like an immunodeficient disease. We don't really know, but if you're telling me the values of whatever things I had on my blood, I don't remember right now, but they were saying basically that, like, if they continue to be that low, then I could lose consciousness or worse. And I kept waiting for them to find out what it was, and they eventually took me into another hospital. I stayed for a few days there. They did a lot of check-ins, and then I said, okay, enough. No one knows shit. Okay, just tell me when you are done with those tests, and I'll just try to keep going. I kept on taking the antibiotics that they gave me until they ran out, and then I learned to surf, and I became a surf instructor, and I went to dive with a few friends in a different island in the Canary Islands. And a few months after, when I was already back in the UK feeling great, they told me what it was, and they told me that I probably, like, my own system got rid of it, and it was just like a strong thing, but nothing that I need to be worrying about anymore. And it was there where I realized that, like, I no longer feel uneasy about death, because I had professionals, people who's in charge of telling you that you might die, telling me that I that my life might be a risk, that they have no idea what is happening to me. And I was pretty calm. Like, I was all right. All I was worrying about is, what am I going to spend whatever time I have, right? Because although I do have a fear of a wasted life, or not having been able to write a book I wanted to write, being in the place I want to be, and all of that, I don't disagree or regret anything I have done. I genuinely have done the best I could with every single minute of my life. So I don't, when that happened, I was not like, oh shit, you know, I didn't do what I should have or what I ought to. No, I wrote a poem and an epitaph, and I learned to surf, and I surfed, and I went with a friend to an island, and then I went diving, and then I moved up and down, and I had a great time. And I was like, okay, whenever it happens, it happens, and if it doesn't, well, then I will continue to live the way I did. There is nothing to change. And over the last year, that's been sinking in more and more and more, to a point where right now I kind of feel invincible again in a different way to how I did before. Because now I am aware of all of that, but I also now know that I can deal with it. It is, in a way, it is familiar to me. I'm not saying that what I experienced has nothing to do. I know that many of you have experienced worse things, but I can only speak for myself. And as far as I know, and as far as I have experienced, and I have seen a lot of things, it is, I'm not going to say a familiar friend or anything like that, but it's something I know. And the main reasons why I could fear it have been dealt with. I don't have anything else to say about this. So no, it does not make me feel uneasy. It's something very natural. I philosophically agree with the idea of dying as well. I think that we all should die. I think that some of us deserve more time than others, but that's not up to me to decide, unfortunately. Otherwise, I would decide. Many people say, no, I would not press the button if I had it. I would get rid of half of humanity. I have a very genocidal mind. I don't think that we deserve to live at all as a species. But if we are to stay here, we might as well make the best of it and not make it worse for others. And I live by those two things. I genuinely make it as good as I can without actually corrupting the world for others or anything like that. And I knew this video was gonna be very personal and, like this, but I didn't expect it to be so much. So yeah, that's all I had to say. I'm gonna tag some people now. And yeah, there you go, a bit of me. You know a little bit more of me now. About me. Now I'm tagging Sean Distenfast. Of course, I just want to know what he thinks about this topic and everything. I'm also tagging The Left Hand Reader. I'm tagging David Novak. I'm tagging David Wiley as well. Bookstalgic. I'm tagging Sailing Through Books. I don't know if Sis is still here, because she made a few great videos that you should all watch. Sailing Through Books, her channel. But then she stopped making them. I guess she seems to have a pretty busy life, since I think she works or studies physics or something to do with it. So yeah, if she is around, I think this is the kind of tag that I would love to hear her talk about it. I also tag Another Bibliophile Reads. I tag John David because he also reads philosophy, and I'm sure that he will have some philosophical insights related to his own readings. Although it's my belief that philosophers are more wrong than most people about death. I think that the thoughts about death are very simple, and philosophies tend to overcomplicate things. Carpe diem. Carpe diem is all you need to know about it. Tempus fugit and carpe diem. That's it. But of course, still, I'm sure that John David has read something related to death, especially some 20th century philosopher that will be, very obscure and esoteric, and that I would love to read anyways, because yeah, I do have a sweet tooth for that kind of philosophy. And finally, since, part of this tag was also to bring humor to this topic, I know Katie Books doesn't do tags, but if you would if you feel like it, please do a tag about this, because I'd love to hear Katie Books talking about death. I think it could be very fun. And yeah, that's it. This is a very long video. I'm sorry about that. Actually, I'm not sorry. I'm a very interesting person, which means I get to talk a lot about myself when someone asks me questions. And yeah, that was of course not ironic either. I'm just also very arrogant and narcissistic. But on that note, I'm leaving you there. I hope you have a nice day, and I'll see you on the other side. And try not to die before I make the next video. Thank you